Hey guys, Andrew here again. I'm going to be doing another series review. So, the name of the series is Mythomania. It's by Kate McMillian. What this is it's a series that tells Greek myths from another viewpoint, and it's a children's series, so there's a little bit of stuff that's going to be dumbed down for children, of course, but I think it's an interesting series, and I'd like to take a chance to go through what I've read of it and my opinions of it. I just finished the 9th book in the series, and I'm going to cover all those involved, give a little bit about each of them. So, the basic premise of the series is that one of the Greek gods went and got a big book of Greek myths and starts flipping through, and he's going, wait, that didn't happen. That didn't happen the way that happened. And just like, why is all these stories a little bit off and a little different? And the explanation is, it's like, oh, well, it's because Zeus is a mythomaniac, meaning he is a big fat liar. He retold all of the stories to make himself and his children and his siblings look better than they actually were. And so this god decides, I'm going to tell the stories from my point of view, aka the truth. And that Greek god is Hades. Yes. So this adds an interesting idea to the element of, because if Zeus and all the gods are real, then clearly Zeus would manipulate stories to make himself look better. So I'm gonna get started on the first book of the series, which is called "Have a Hot Time, Hades." Um, this is the origin story of how they came into being, how they became Greek gods, this and that. I'm gonna just go over a little bit about that. So, as some of you may or may not know, um, Kronos and his wife Rhea had children, and and Kronos was told, "Oh, one of your children will rise up and destroy you." So Kronos, to try and prevent that, started swallowing his children. First one he swallowed was Hades, the oldest. And so the book starts with Hades being in the dark and alone, and then slowly the other gods come in: Poseidon, Hera, Demeter, Hecate. And then after a little while, they don't seem to have any more brothers and sisters coming down. And then this large stone, this bundle of cloth comes falling down, and it's just this large stone. And they're like, okay, is this our brother? Do we have a sixth brother who's made of stone? Anyway, Hecate goes really attached to it and basically carts it around everywhere with her. And the others are a little bit more loose with it, and they just kick it around and play with it and try to have fun. One day, their father Zeus passes out, um, and someone slices into them and pull them out. And on the other side of that is, and they basically escape, and they run out, and they're like, "How did we get out?" And this gentleman pops up and goes, "I did it! I saved all of you! My name is Zeus. I'm your brother. You shall worship me." And it's one of those things, like the first thing that happens right after that is Rhea comes down and she's like, no, I made it the plan. I gave your father the knockout drug to put him to sleep, and I'm the one that got you out. So we already kind of get an idea of who Zeus is. Zeus, while instead of being swallowed, was raised by humans who saw him as a god and treated him like a god. So he has a very high level of pride and self-belief. He's arrogant. Um, so to escape their father's wrath, they leave and go to a new place to find their own type of home, which they end up on Mount Olympus. Yes. So along the way, they meet Pan, the god of nature, who's half man, half goat. And also when they finally found this, all these other gods start appearing, and they're like, "Oh, who are you?" "Oh, I'm Aphrodite. My father is Zeus. I'm Artemis and Apollo. Our father is Zeus." And they just find out that Zeus has basically slept with every single woman on the entire trip up. And they're like, okay. Meanwhile, the Titans have banded together, and they're like, we're going to compete with the gods. The gods don't know this. They have been spending their time creating a brand new game involving their rock brother that involves them kicking him between two lines that make out a goalpost. Yeah, they basically make soccer. Again, this is a kid's book, and this is, for me, one of the things that makes me a little on the series. Because I do like the series a lot, but this was not that great a thing. But the reason they did this, and I understand the reason why this is in here, is that, it's a kid's book, and it's the first of a series of kids' book. You don't want the original plot line, which is the gods and the titans fighting to the death. That's not a good way to start out a kid's book. So instead of, when the titans do show up, instead of fighting, they're like, we'll compete. We'll do a bunch of competitions, and that'll decide who deserves to be the ones in charge. And basically, they tie up everything, and then they're like, all right, we challenge you to kick rock, this game that we've invented. And they fight for weeks, like weeks and weeks. And the gods realize, we're not going to win at this rate. At this rate, we'll just end up destroying everything around us. And and Rhea comes to him and says, oh, there is somebody who can help you. Our cousins were imprisoned by Kronos, and they hate the Titans as much as you do. They may help you. And it's like, who are your cousins? Well, they are the Cyclopses and the Thousand Armed Men. So Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades agree to go to the underworld to release their brothers. And this is not a simple journey. This takes a week to get there and a week to get back. So they go into the underworld, defeat the Titan that's protecting the cages, and release their cousins. In recognition of their bravery and helping them out, each of the three gods that rescued them receives a special gift from the Cyclopses, who are master smiths. They're master blacksmiths. So Poseidon gets his trident, Hades gets his helmet of invisibility, and Zeus gets his bucket of bolts, which allows him to throw lightning. Interesting retelling of the way Zeus can throw lightning. I actually really like it. I thought that's kind of an interesting way of dealing with that. So with the Cyclopses and the Thousand Armed Men at their side, Zeus and the other Greeks are able to overthrow the Titans, and they chase them down into the underworld and lock all of them in the cells with the exception of one, Atlas. During the commotion, Kronos knocked over one of the pillars of the earth, and Gaia came in and intervened and got super mad. She is basically their grandmother, the great mother Gaia, and she's like, one of you, the leader of the Titans, for knocking over this pillar has to take its place. Now Kronos, while not technically Kronos was the leader, but he's like, oh no, the one you want is Atlas. He's the one who's running the world. So Atlas has to now hold up that specific. He has to take the spot and hold up that part of the earth, which I really like. That was a really interesting to me retelling of the Atlas story and of the idea of holding up the earth. And instead of having to hold up the entire earth, he has to hold up this pivotal, basically the support beam of the earth. And that if he does not, the world will collapse into itself. I'm like, that is a really interesting reimagining of it. And I wish they'd kept that for a later part in the book, in the series, which I will get to. But, so, having defeated of course, after having just defeated the Titans, a bunch of the monsters come out and start to cause havoc. And Hades basically takes up the reins and goes to save everyone, while Zeus cowers behind him, type of thing. Because Zeus is a big coward in this version, which is not bad. It's, again, someone who's been raised to believe he's special and all important would not necessarily be the person who would do the right thing. So they end up defeating the father of all monsters, and they run into the mother of all monsters, but she's like, oh, it's okay, I understand. And with her is the smallest of all the monsters, Cerberus, the three-headed dog, who takes a liking to Hades, and the mother of all monsters is like, oh, well, he seems to like you. You can go with him as long as you take good care of him. And Hades is like, of course I will. So they go back to Mount Olympus, and everyone's arguing who should be in charge. And Zeus is like, I'm the one that led you into battle. I rescued you. I'm the one who should be in charge. And Hades is like, no, you didn't. And everyone's just arguing and bickering. And after a while, Hades is just like, all right, you know what? I'm going to go be Lord of the Underworld. Goodbye. And he just up and leaves and does the 7-day journey to the underworld to become their lord. And I like that. Honestly, like, really works and makes perfect sense. It sums up Hades in a really interesting way. My family is the most annoying people on the planet. Why would I want to be around them? And it's like, oh, that's a really interesting way to retell that series, and I really enjoyed that book. So we'll go on to the second book, which is Phone Home Persephone, and you might notice there's a difference between this book and this book in the way they look. This was the original production or release by Volo, and this one was done by Capstone. Yeah, this one is a much better looking quality book. This one is okay-ish, but if you look at some of the ones on the back, they're really ugly. They're just all really kind of ugly looking books. And I'm not a big aesthetic person, which is one of the reasons I have one of them. It's just that whatever is the cheapest. But I'm like, I had a point where I had 2 copies of one of the books, and I got rid of the new copy because it's ugly. It's not a great thing to look at. So the second book is the story of Hades and Persephone, which I've read multiple versions of the Persephone story. There are some that are very simple, which is just Persephone found a path to the underworld and went down to gather gold. And Demeter was up on Earth, and she cried and let all the plants die. But as soon as Persephone came back, she brought all that back, and then continued to do that every year for the rest of existence. To the more extreme version of Hades kidnaps her, drags her into the underworld, forces her to eat fruit, may or may not have raped her, and then eventually gives in to Zeus's demands. Yeah. Thankfully, this one chooses to go a completely different path, and I think it works very, very well. The idea of this one is that Persephone is the only daughter of Demeter. And Demeter, having only one child, is super protective and very overprotective. She's trying to hold her daughter in place. So Persephone, being at that age where she's roughly a teenager, just wants to get out, wants to go out and see the world, wants to go out and do things and be things. And she doesn't think she'll be able to, so she's out walking through the forest after having run away, and when she comes across Hades. And she's like, oh, you're my uncle. I've heard about you, and I've heard a little bit about the underworld, but I've never seen it. Would you mind taking me to the underworld so I can see it? And he's a little hesitant because he doesn't like gods or any of their children. But he's like, you know what? I will do so, but only for a little bit, and then you have to go home. And during the time between the first book and the second book, he has found a pathway to make the journey faster. So it only takes like an hour to get back up to the human world as opposed to 7 days. So he takes her down, and she takes in all of the sights and all the things, which is I like, because it's one of those things, like, you don't know a lot about the underworld, and a lot of times we tend to think of it only as the Judeo-Christian hell, that everything's evil here. But in Greek mythology, it's both. You've got Abaddon, which is the dark side, the evil, where everyone is tortured forever, but then you have the Elysian Fields, which is where everyone goes and is happy and is in peace for the rest of their life. And it's interesting to see the way that is played in this book. Persephone knows enough to not eat the fruit down there, because if you eat the fruit, you have to stay. It's one of the things of you have to spend time in the underworld if you eat the fruit of the underworld. Um, which again is how in the original version he tricked her into having to stay with him forever, is make her eat the fruit. So Zeus is like, or Hades is like, okay, that's enough. I'm going to take you home. Takes her back to the surface. She gets off. He goes off and watches a wrestling match following one of his cousins, which is one of the things that I really dislike about the series, is that it's written for children, and it's written for modern day children, so it's written in a modern day tone with things that don't necessarily make sense or work the best way. Like, I can accept certain things, like, oh, they have a television. Well, they're gods. They might be more advanced than we are. They might have abilities to do things of that nature. But when you get into things like his horses are named Harley and Davidson, and they have professional wrestling, it gets a little harder to, like, you just, one of those things you just grow on and go, kids book. Okay. Okay, so after leaving the wrestling match, uh, Hades makes his way down to the underworld when he notices there's a weird noise coming from the back of his chariot. And he opens up a case to discover Persephone was hiding in there. And he's like, what are you doing? You said you would go home. And she's like, but I really enjoyed our time together, and my mom's being what she is. Can I stay with you for a few more days? I just want to get to know you better. And at this point, he's still a little like, but he enjoys his time with her, and is like, okay, I'll let you stay. It'll take your parents 7 days to come to the underworld to get you. When they come, you have to go, though. Okay? And she's like, yes. So they stay in the underworld a little bit, and within like 2 hours, it's like Zeus and everyone shows up, and Hades is like, how did you know about the secret tunnel? And it turned out that Hermes told them, because Hermes is the messenger for the dead. He brings the dead down to the river Styx to be transported to the underworld, and Hades let him know about the secret passage, so it wouldn't take as long for him to make the journey. And of course, Hades tells Hermes, who tells Zeus, who tells Demeter, who instantly is like, we gotta go back. We gotta go save my daughter. So, there's big family debacle, drama, this and that, and Persephone's like, I'm not leaving. And she takes one of the pomegranate fruits, which is the fruit of the underworld, at least in Greek mythology, and eats it. And it's like, now you can't make me go back. And Demeter's like, yes, I can, and I swear on the river Styx, which is an unbreakable curse, by the way. She swore on the river Styx that as long as Persephone was down in the underworld, nothing on the earth would grow. And eventually, through bickering and through arguing, and Hades trying to defend Persephone, trying to protect her, realizes that he loves her, because she's the first person that's like him, that he understands, that he can truly care about. And he's like, all right, I will make you a deal. It's like, I love your Demeter, I love your daughter. I would like her to be my bride. If you allow us this, you can have her for 9 months out of the year. She will have to come down to the underworld for 3 months, so that she doesn't, die from the fruit. And that way you get her for the majority of time, and everything works out. And Demeter's like, no, I want her full time. And Zeus is like, you be quiet. I will agree to this. And basically, happy ending for everyone. I really like this. I think it's an interesting reimagining of the Persephone story, because the Persephone story is the entire reason why we see Hades as a dark, evil character. Because other than the fact that he runs the underworld, because that's the two things we know about Hades, is that he runs the underworld and that he kidnapped Persephone and may or may not have raped her. But if you don't have that Hades story, that Hades Persephone story, then all we know about Hades at all is that he runs the underworld. There's nothing really in mythology that gives him character or development other than this story. And if you were Zeus and you hated Hades, wouldn't you make a story that shows him in the worst light? So yeah, I like this. It's a really interesting, and it makes Zeus, it makes Hades a sympathetic character. It makes him and Persephone is a really good character. I'm like, she's really teenagerish in this book to a certain extent, but as the book's series progresses, she becomes a very good balance for Hades, and they work out very well together. So book 3, and I don't have a copy of this one because we're going to get into this part of the series where there are certain ones that follow a similar arc, and that's 3 books specifically that do this. And this is the first one, which is Say Cheese Medusa, which is the story of Medusa and... Sorry, I keep forgetting his name. His name was Perseus. Medusa and Perseus and the Gorgons and all that. So, the main beats at this one is where it's not really that so much is different in the story. It's more of, it's just kind of Hades tagging along for the ride with a main character who's a little bit stupid. So yeah, that plays a major part in 3 of these stories. It's just, he kind of tags along, and then the main character starts to do something stupid, and Hades just kind of pushes him in the right direction. He doesn't try to get involved for the most part. He usually sticks to with just his helmet on and is invisible and stays out of the action as best he can. Though he helps out when he can, because he actually seems to care about humanity, unlike most of the other gods, which is interesting. The one thing that's kind of interesting about Say Cheese Medusa is that they actually tell the story of how Medusa became Medusa, which is that Medusa was in Athena's temple with Poseidon. When Athena showed up, Poseidon vanished, and Medusa and her 2 sisters took the wrath. The reason for this, though, there's a sub-reason in the book that's a little bit interesting and a little bit childish, which is the reason that Athena did not like Medusa and her 2 sisters is because they were sirens with beautiful glowing hair, and Athena suffered from helmet hair. Yeah, that's sort of interesting because it would make sense considering you always see her in pictures with that helmet on, but it's also like, really? But yeah, it happened. And they all work out and balance things together, and it's an okay story. The next one is the 4th book in the series, which is one of the other ones that I highly recommend, which is called Nice Shot, Cupid. This is actually a really undertold, little-known myth. It's the story of Cupid and this woman named Psyche. And Psyche was a human woman who was very beautiful. And in the original myth, one day she happened to across Cupid and fell instantly in love with him because he was so gorgeous and so beautiful. And Aphrodite, being his mom, said, "Oh no, you can't. If you want him, you have to complete 100 trials of my choosing before you can have my son." This version's a little bit different in that Cupid is not drop dead gorgeous. He is going through his geeky, awkward puberty teen phase. So he's got zits and acne and his braces and all that fun stuff. And he falls in love with Psyche, not the other way around. And he kidnaps Psyche and keeps her in his house. And he takes good care of her. He feeds her. He's doing everything he can to try and attract her. And basically, he talks to her through a mirror. She can't see him, she can only hear him. And over time, she develops love for him. And eventually, Aphrodite finds out about this. She doesn't want her son hooking up with anyone, especially a mortal. And is basically pushing her son. She's like, and Psyche and Cupid finally meet, and she's actually like, "Oh, I don't care about the way you look. I love you for who you are." And Aphrodite pushes Cupid into hiding, and like, "Psyche, if you do not deserve my son," and she's like, "Well, what can I do to prove it?" Thus, the 100 trial starts. The thing that's a little different in this one is like Hades, like for the last book and some of the other ones, will follow a person throughout their entire adventure or good portions of their adventure. This one, he helps her with like the first couple, and he's like, "All right, Aphrodite's clearly going to let her go, have him now. I'm just going to go home." And he doesn't see Psyche again until she's on like number 99 of her 100 trials, which her 99th objective was to get lip gloss from Persephone in the underworld. So he intervenes and gets Zeus to intervene, and they're like, Aphrodite, you cannot. This woman has done 100 tasks. You have to let her have Cupid. They're in love. And she's like, no. He is my son. I'm keeping him. And Zeus is like, oh, yes, you are. Which is one of the things. Like, Zeus is kind of in the background and doesn't like to get involved in these drama things. But when he does, he'll put his foot down, which is kind of nice. So, Cupid and Psyche are married, and Psyche is given ambrosia, which turns her into a god. And it's one of the few stories that I've ever come across where a pure 100% human, becomes a god. And this, to me, is like a super interesting story because I never heard of this story before I read this book. And I've gone and looked up the story since, and it's like a very small it's like a sub story that someone wrote. It's not considered, so a lot of times they don't consider it part of the actual mythos of mythology, but I think it's really interesting, and it really does a different take on the gods and how a human can earn their way to becoming a god. It's a really nice, sweet story. Okay. So book 5 of the series is called Stop That Bull, Theseus. It's the story of Theseus, the Labyrinth, and the Minotaur. And I don't own this one. I don't remember much about the book, honestly, other than like basically the main plot is Theseus is forgetful, and Hades has to follow him around the entire time to help him get through the labyrinth and defeat the Minotaur. And I think they don't necessarily defeat the Minotaur. I think he becomes a wrestler. I don't remember this one. It's not one of the better ones. It's one of the really weak ones. After that is Keep a Lid on It, Pandora, which is actually an interesting retelling of Pandora's story and the story of the Titan Prometheus. Basically, Prometheus tricks Zeus takes the fire from Olympus and gives it down to the humans. And Zeus is like, okay, fine, I will permit this, but you must present me offerings. And Prometheus convinced the human to trick Zeus. So the humans trick Zeus into picking the bad meat, the bones, the unhealthy stuff to be offered as sacrifice instead of the fresh, healthy meat. So that way the humans can grow on and survive while the offerings they would die if they had to give up the good meat type of thing. So Zeus, in all of his anger and rage at this having been tricked, decides to punish the humans. So he makes a box, fills it with the darkest evils, seals it up, and gives it to Pandora and says, "You must protect this, never open the lid," knowing full well that she might and wanting her to. The difference in this book is that Pandora doesn't want to open the box. She has no desire whatsoever to open the box. And Zeus who wants his revenge is like, okay, I need to trick her into opening the box. And he tries multiple different methods and doesn't win. And eventually, I think he ends up having someone else open the box. And then, but the thing that's inside the box is not evil as it was originally intended. It's more of pet peeves like jock itch or, you know, itching and just weird little things that aren't that big of a deal. You know, acne and home. Oh, one of the good things was like one of the things in there was homework. Makes me laugh. Next in the series, I have Get to Work Hercules, which is a lot like the Say Cheese Medusa and Stop That Bull Theseus. It's just, you know, Zeus following behind, or Hades following behind Hercules while he completes his tasks. There's not much different to it other than like little jokes and and basically Hercules is an idiot, and Hades has to help him out. I was like, I picked up the book because I got it for $1. And I'm like, any of the series I would pick up for a good price, so I'm not that against it. It's just the one thing that really kind of bothers me with this book specifically is that you have the scene where Hercules runs into Atlas, and Atlas transfers the earth onto his shoulders. But to do that, they chose to go with the more generic Atlas holding up the actual physical globe and handing that to Hercules, who nearly dies under it thing. And I'm like, you spent all that time in the first one building up this really cool idea of him holding up the pillar, and then you dropped it by the 7th book. It's like you could have kept the original idea in there and just modified it slightly, but they chose to go with that, and I don't particularly love that. So, number 8 is Go for the Gold Atlantia. This I can never say this name, Atlantia. I just call it that. So the story of Atlantia is the idea of this. There was a woman raised by bears who found out she was of royalty, and basically her royal family wanted her to get married and have kids and all that, and she's like, I will only marry the person who is faster than me at a foot race. And during the final foot, she won for a year straight, and then finally when the last suitor came by, Hera, who had been very mad at her for many years, threw golden apples onto the field, and Atlantia, in her selfishness, ran off the track to pick up said apples and lost the race. This version is a lot different. Most of the beginning is roughly the same. It's the same thing. The only reason that she went back to her rich family and was trying to do all this is because one of her friends got very sick, and she was trying to get gold to get them better. So when it comes time to that final race, and Hera throws down the golden apple, she's going after him not because she's self-centered and wants to be rich, is she's trying to help out her friend. One of the other major things that was going on to the story is that Atalanta did not want to run. She hated running. She did not like racing. She wanted to be a wrestler like her brothers, her bear brothers. She felt that was her strength, and she wanted to go to the Olympics as a wrestler. But everyone's like, but you're such a good runner, you need to run. She's like, no, I hate it. And during the final race, she goes and gets the apples, and she looks, and the other guy is almost to the finish line, and she looks out in the crowd, and her bear mother is there, and she's like, run the way we taught you. So Atlanta gets on all fours and runs at super neck speed and wins the race. And she's like, I hate doing that. It's so demeaning and so uncomfortable to run on all fours. And then in the end of the story, she ends up going to the Olympics and actually competes as a professional wrestler, and then competes as a runner too, and wins the gold for both, I believe. Again, this is another one of those stories that's not super told. It's a very smaller, lesser known myth, and I like the reimagining of this one. It's a little too like schmaltzy, and the bear running thing is kind of weird, but it kind of works and it kind of makes sense. so I don't have too much grievances towards it. I really think it's an interesting story and a well-told story. For the final book, this is book 9 out of the 10, which is the one I just read, which is called Hit the Road, Helen, which is about Helen of Troy. And this one presented a couple different problems because, like I said, the first book, she avoided battle for this because it's a kid's book and she didn't want to portray that too much. This one is all about battle and all about war, and it deals with some very adult ideas. One of the major differences in this story is in the original story, Helen fell in love with Paris of Troy, leaving her husband and going off to Troy with him and staying there for years. In this version, the reason Helen went with Paris is because Aphrodite had ordered Cupid to shoot her with a love arrow. And he used a magical arrow that he did not know he just made. He did not know the full ramifications of how long it would last or what this would do or this and that. But the reason that Aphrodite ordered this is because there was a competition going on between herself, Athena, and Hera of who was the most beautiful and who was the best. And originally Zeus was supposed to choose who it was, but being Zeus and not liking confrontation and not liking being put in that situation, it's like, I decided the judge will be that human, Paris of Troy, the most beautiful male human on the planet. And Paris is like, okay. And he's like, well, what can you goddesses offer me? And Paris is like, I can offer you gold. And Athena's like, I can offer you your own army. And Aphrodite's like, I can offer you the most beautiful woman in the world. And Paris is like, I'll take that one. So, of course, the most beautiful woman in the world is Helen of Troy. So, the book takes place mostly with Hades trying to prevent the war and then trying to get the war to end sooner and but also having to deal with the fact that now the underworld is overwhelmed with the dead soldiers of both sides. And which is really interesting. It's really dark adult themes that they're dealing with. They're dealing with war, and they're dealing with death, and they're dealing with the idea of the afterlife is that you go into the afterlife and there's the person who killed you standing right across from you. And it's kind of interesting because there's a point where there's two strong warriors from opposing sides, and they meet in the underworld, and they're like, she's like, I was killed by. It's like, I killed it, and it's like, and he's like, no, you killed me. And but they end up connecting, and they end up having this weird little relationship. It's only like a 3-page thing, so you don't see their relationship build or anything, but it's a really interesting concept of enemies becoming, connected in the afterlife. It's an interesting depiction of Helen because the idea is like Helen fell in love with Paris, and like the reality is she didn't really love anyone. She married her first husband because she loved the color of his hair, and that was it. She mostly cared only about sewing and needlepoint, so she would make thousands of tapestries and different things in the same red shade as his hair. And yeah, it's an interesting one. I wouldn't say it's the strongest of them, but it's got some really good parts to it, some really interesting stuff to it. All right, so the series overall, it's a really interesting idea. It's a unique way of telling these stories that some are really old, well-known myths, and some are lesser-known myths, to tell it from the viewpoint of a god who can be a little bit unbiased. And to tell it from Hades' point of view is really interesting because we don't know much about Hades as a character, as a being. It's a really easy read, really fast. Again, kids' book. Can read that. But the fact that it's a kid book is also some of the problems. The language in this book is very rough, and I don't mean rough as in it's hard to read or as that it's difficult. It's that it's written for children, and it comes off very childish. Because you'll have characters saying things like babe and dude and these little talking like a valley girl and language that doesn't fit and doesn't work with what the subject matter is and different things of that nature. So like this one, Hit the Road Helen, was very hard for me to actually get through because I'd forgotten how dramatically different this language could be sometimes, and this one was really harder to get into for that. That said, once you get used to the language, it works. It works well. It's an easy read. It's fast paced. The characters are really good and really well interesting. I really love the connection of Hades and Persephone. They make a really good couple. The idea that even though they're only technically together for 3 months out of the year, he goes and visits her every week when she's up on Earth, and which is part of the reason why he keeps getting into these other adventures is I go visit her and I see, oh, there's Hercules. Let me go say hi. And this and that works very well, and they're a really good, well-balanced couple. Like this book really shows that to a certain extent of this last book, is that the underworld is overwhelmed with all of these people, and Hades is like, I want this war to stop, but I have to stay down here and help everything out. And Persephone, who's down there for the first of her 3 months, is like, no, you go up and you deal with the war and you try and help end it. I will stay down here and I'll help out and make sure everything down here is okay. And he's like, are you sure? I'm like, this is our time together. And she's like, yes, but this is about more than just us. And that worked very well, and it's really interesting and well played as a couple. All of the characters are really well defined, and you can understand them and get who they are and why they are the way they are to a certain extent. So it works really well. Aphrodite is actually hilarious in the book series because she talks with a really phony Italian accent because I was born off of Sicily. I was born out of the sea dust out of Sicily, so I am actually Italian. I am not Greek, which is why my son is called Cupid and not Eros, like you want to call him. And it's a really interesting interpretation of all those characters and how, and it's like it keeps their vainness and their selfishness there, but gives them a little bit more humanity and a little bit more ability to understand them. Like even Zeus, like even though I said Zeus is one of the most annoying characters, and you can tell that he lies and manipulates every situation. And any time a battle or something of importance comes up, he goes and cowers and stays out of the way. He is relatable, and you can understand why he is the way he is, and you can even appreciate him sometimes. And like overall, it's like the lowest I would give any book in this series, and you can tell from my review, the lowest I would give any of them is a 3 out of 5. Some of them, it's just the story is a little blasé, or it doesn't work as well, or this and that. And then there are others that I would give 5 out of 5, and I highly recommend. If you've listened to this and there's anything in this that catches your interest, if you're even remotely interested in the series, I highly recommend the first 2 books, Have a Hot Time Hades, Phone Home Persephone, and book 4, Nice Shot Cupid. Those 4 books are extremely good. They're really good retellings of these stories, and they expanded my knowledge to the point that I can actually talk about mythology and things with people that actually study mythology and be able to stay on par with them, even though my mythology base is from before this series, my mythology base was from Xena and Hercules, the TV shows. So this really expanded, and it's really interesting reimagining of these stories. So that's all for now. I probably won't be posting another one of these for a while. Just things have gotten a little complicated, and I don't have as much time to read as I would like. I'm trying to read because books that I've read aren't winning the votes anymore, which is good. I actually prefer that. So hopefully I can do another one of these before the end of the year. I'll probably do one in the next 4 months or so, but we'll see. I might also do some ones that I've read in the past and just want to talk about a little bit. I don't know. I might do Harry Potter. I might do Hunger Games. I don't know. If there's one that you would like to hear my opinion on, or you think I might have read, or you've read and you think I might have read and want to know, let me know. Otherwise, happy reading all, and I'll hope to see y'all soon. Bye.